Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am sharing day 11 of the 12 days of Stitchmas. The 12 days of Stitchmas is an advent calendar with 12 different windows in it. Each one has a stitching themed holiday die. I have done 1 to 10 already, and they were all in the same playlist. So if you've missed any of them, you'll find them in the same playlist as this video. So today's die is this adorable little holiday owl with a toque on its head. So I'm doing all of my die cutting off screen. You can do this with whatever color scheme you want. I chose to do my owl in 2 tones of brown. I'm using acorn cardstock as well as truffle cardstock. And then I die cut my toque with poppy cardstock, and I'm using some white glitter cardstock for the trim as well as the little pom-pom on the top. So I typically will do the stitching part first, but this time I'm going to do the assembly of the owl as well as the toque before time so that can be drying while I'm stitching the wings and the little belly. So I have the owl itself as well as the legs and some of the facial features die cut out of truffle cardstock, and then the wings and the belly are die cut out of the acorn cardstock. The toque, easy to put together, and the glitter cardstock that I'm using is white glitter from the Antique White Treasured Cardstock Pack. This Treasured Cardstock Pack has 15 sheets in it. There's 5 different finishes. I'm using the glitter finish, but obviously you could use the metallic or the pearl if you wanted to. I love having the specialty papers with several different finishes, so you can pick and choose which works best for what you're doing. For the little eye pieces here, they're really, really tiny, so they're a little bit harder to hold while you're gluing them. So I'm just using my reverse tweezers to hold those pieces. That way I don't have my fingers in the way and I can easily apply that glue. The glue I'm using is Barely Art glue. It's in a fine line bottle. I like using a liquid glue because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room for moving those pieces around. For my stitching, I just chose a cream floss, and I'm using 2 strands of that floss. I already have it divided and threaded into my needle. Anytime I do stitching, I always use a little bit of Best Ever craft tape to tape down the ends of my floss just to hold it nice and secure while I'm stitching. That way I don't have to worry about accidentally pulling it out. The stitching is really, really easy to do because when you do your die cutting of these pieces, it creates a little indent where that floss is intended to go. So it's very intuitive, knowing exactly which piece to glue down or to stitch where those stitches go. And obviously you can get a little bit creative with it, but I typically will go, especially if I'm just using the die for the first time, I'll typically go exactly where they want those pieces to go. Also, typically when I'm doing stitching, I'll usually cut my pieces twice and then glue a piece behind it to secure that floss in place. I didn't do that for these ones because I'm gluing them right to the owl base. So they're going right down to that. It's already going to have that dimension to it because of that stitching and because that extra piece on top of the base. So I figured that was good enough. But if you wanted to have a little bit more texture to it, a little bit more dimension to it, you could always die cut a second piece of each one of the wings and then glue those to the back before gluing them to the base. After I've glued them down, I'm just using my large acrylic block to hold those pieces down nice and flat. Typically when I have individual pieces that I've stitched, and you can see that with the other videos I've done in this playlist, I'll use sewing clips to hold those pieces in place. I don't do it with this one because I'm gluing it right to that owl base. The acrylic block holds it down well enough for what I need for this particular piece. I could use those sewing clips, but I already have that acrylic block in use to hold down the toque and the other pieces that I've glued down. So I'm just using that for this. You can see that the stitching goes really, really quick and easy. It takes longer to die cut these pieces than it does to stitch them and to glue them together. So the stitching itself doesn't take a long time, but it adds a lot of interesting texture to these pieces and they make them nice and unique. So once I have this glued down, ready to go, I'll set that aside and then I'll work on my card base. When I'm creating cards with stitching elements on them, I often like to do a little bit of embossing in the background just to add a little bit of subtle texture to that background and fill in that space. So for this particular card, I'm using the Holly and Foliage embossing folder, and I'm just embossing hammermill cardstock. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. If you wanted it to be colored, you obviously could emboss a colored cardstock instead. once I have that embossed. I'm trimming that down to 3 3/4 inches. I have my piece of truffle cardstock here that I used to die cut my owl base as well as some of the other elements, and that is trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. You can see that I die cut my pieces right out of the center, just a way of extending your cardstock just a little bit. You don't need to do this, but I often do this, especially with specialty cardstocks. I have one of the sentiments that I made in a previous video left over from creating those. These were done in the Better Press system with the Merry Memories or Merry Messages press plate and die set, and I did that with some lumberjack plaid distress ink. Just a cute little sentiment to add to the bottom. You could even use a die cut sentiment as well. Here is the finished card. Very, very simple, but it's got so much texture to it between that embossed background, the stitching detail on the die, and then the glitter cardstock for the trim on the little hat on the owl. Thank you so much for joining me today for day 11 of the 12 Days of Stitchmas. I will be back again tomorrow and we'll share day 12, or the last day. We'll see you then.